The distress signal. It was a quiet day in the galaxy. The stars twinkled calmly in the vastness of space. The various planets, each with its own people and cultures, were going about their daily lives. But something strange was happening, something no one could explain. Deep within the galaxy, on the edge of a distant star system, a signal was sent. It was weak and faint, barely reaching any of the communication stations scattered throughout the galaxy. But the few who received it couldn't ignore it. The message was a distress call. The signal came from a place no one had ever heard of. The system it came from was known to be uninhabited, or so everyone thought. It was a dark, isolated area of space, far from the more well-known star systems. For many years, no one had even thought to explore it. But now, someone had sent a cry for help. The message was difficult to decode. The signal was weak, as though it had traveled a long distance across the galaxy. The first words were fragmented, garbled, almost impossible to make out. But there was one word that came through loud and clear: help. It was followed by an urgent plea, though the rest of the message was unintelligible. The only thing that was clear was that whoever was sending it was in trouble, and the threat was not something ordinary. The message reached the Central Command of the Galactic Council, an organization that managed peace and order across the known universe. The Council was used to receiving distress signals. Pirates, storms, or minor rebellions were common problems. But this was different. This wasn't an ordinary call for help. Something bigger was at play. An emergency meeting was called. Representatives from across the galaxy quickly gathered in a large high-tech room. The Council's top leaders sat around a massive table, staring at the holographic image of the star system where the signal originated. The images of distant planets and moons flickered on the screen, showing what little they knew of this unknown place. The more they looked, the less they understood. Why would someone send a distress signal from a system that has been uninhabited for centuries? One of the leaders asked. His voice echoed in the room. The system is too far from the nearest populated planets. There's nothing there but old debris, another leader replied. Are we sure the signal is from that system? The officer in charge of the communications spoke up. Yes. The coordinates match. The source is definitely from there. The room fell silent. Everyone knew something was wrong. The fact that the message had made it all the way across the galaxy, despite the weak signal, was strange. It shouldn't have been possible for someone to be there, especially someone who was in enough danger to send a signal for help. There were no known inhabitants in that area. The system had been considered abandoned for a long time, and no one had ever thought to establish any colonies there. The planets were either too hostile, too cold, or simply too far from any main trade routes. But now, there was a message, a desperate cry for help. The Council discussed what to do. They couldn't ignore it. They had to send a team to investigate. But who? The galaxy was full of species that had different abilities and strengths. Most of them were peaceful, while others were more dangerous. The question was, who could survive in a place that had been empty for so long? After much deliberation, the Council decided to call upon the Deathworlders, a legendary group of humans known for their strength and resilience. They were feared across the galaxy, not because they were cruel or aggressive, but because of their homeworld, Earth. Earth was a death world, a planet filled with dangers like no other. Its creatures were wild and untamable, and its environment was harsh and unforgiving. The humans of Earth had survived these dangers and thrived, becoming one of the most formidable species in the galaxy. Other species may have had advanced technology or powerful weapons, but no one could match the human spirit. Humans had learned to adapt, survive, and fight back against the toughest of odds. The Deathworlders, a group of elite soldiers, were sent on the most dangerous missions, often in situations where no one else would survive. They were known for their resourcefulness, courage, and relentless will to win. And now, they were needed more than ever. The decision was made. The Deathworlder fleet would mobilize. They would travel to the unknown system and find out who had sent the signal and what kind of danger they were facing. As the fleet prepared, word spread quickly across the galaxy. News of the distress signal traveled like wildfire, sparking fear and curiosity in equal measure. No one knew what awaited the Deathworlders, but there was one thing they all agreed on: the danger was real. Something terrible was on the horizon. In the quiet corners of space, the darkness was growing, and the galaxy's last hope for survival was about to take off on a journey that would change everything. The countdown had begun. The Deathworlders respond. As the galaxy's leaders debated the best course of action, the Deathworlder fleet began its preparations. The mere mention of the name Deathworlder was enough to send a shiver down the spine of any being in the galaxy. These humans, born and raised on a planet where survival was a daily battle, had earned their reputation. Earth, their home, was a world filled with deadly creatures, extreme environments, and hazards that would break lesser species. But not humans. Humans had adapted, evolved, and thrived in this chaos. The Deathworlder fleet was not like any other fleet in the galaxy. Their ships were designed not just for space travel, but for war. Built to withstand the harshest conditions, they were heavily armed, fast, and made for the unexpected. The crew members, humans from every corner of Earth, were as diverse as they were deadly. They were soldiers, engineers, pilots, and tacticians, trained to think outside the box and face unimaginable threats with a calm and relentless focus. The fleet's flagship, the Ragnarok, sat in orbit above Earth, its massive hull gleaming under the distant light of the sun. The ship, like all the Deathworlder vessels, was equipped with advanced technology, but it was the crew's mentality that set them apart. They were not just warriors. They were survivors. Each of them had faced battles on Earth that no one else could comprehend. From surviving extreme weather to outsmarting deadly predators, they were prepared for anything. The fleet's commander, Captain Alex Stroud, stood on the bridge of the Ragnarok, watching the screen in front of her. The distress signal had been received, and she had been given the task of leading the Deathworlders into the unknown. She was calm, focused, but there was a certain weight in her eyes, a weight that came with the knowledge that their mission would not be easy. "Captain, we've received new intel," her communications officer, Lieutenant Vargas, said, his voice steady but tinged with urgency. "The alien fleet we're up against is unlike anything we've faced before. They've wiped out entire systems. If we don't act fast, we could lose everything." Alex nodded, her mind already racing through the possible outcomes. She was a seasoned leader, having fought in countless battles across the galaxy, but this was different. The enemy wasn't just a force of nature. They were a calculated, unstoppable machine, and they had one goal: to conquer. The distress signal was the galaxy's warning. The question was, how would the Deathworlders respond? "We'll need to move quickly," Alex said. "Prep the fleet for jump. I want all ships in formation, ready for immediate deployment. We don't know what we're walking into, but we can't afford to waste time. Every second counts." Her orders were sharp and clear, and within moments, the crew sprang into action. The Ragnarok and the other ships in the fleet began to power up, their engines humming with energy. Each vessel was a fortress, but they weren't just relying on their firepower to win this battle. They were counting on their skills, their resilience, and their ability to think in ways that no other species could. As the fleet prepared for departure, the mood aboard the ships was tense but focused. The Deathworlders knew what was at stake. Many had lost loved ones to previous invasions, to enemies they couldn't defeat. They couldn't afford to fail this time. They had to stop the alien armada before it reached the heart of the galaxy, before it reached Earth itself. The crew members went about their duties with precision, their movements a testament to years of training and experience. On the Ragnarok, Alex stood at the helm, her eyes fixed on the stars ahead. The silence in the command center was thick, broken only by the hum of the ship's systems coming to life. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity of preparation, the fleet was ready. The ship's navigation officer, Lieutenant Drake, called out to the captain, his voice steady but urgent. "Captain, we're ready to jump. Coordinates are locked in." Elix took a deep breath, her eyes narrowing as she focused on the task at hand. She had led her people through battles before, but this felt different. The unknown lay ahead, and it was terrifying. Still, she knew what had to be done. "Execute," she commanded. With a flash of light, the Deathworlder fleet jumped through hyperspace, their ships disappearing into the void in an instant. They were on their way to the unknown system, the source of the distress signal. But even as they traveled through the vastness of space, they could feel the weight of the coming battle hanging over them. The fleet emerged from hyperspace in the distant system. The stars around them seemed eerily quiet, and there was a strange stillness in the air. The planets in the system were barren, their surfaces scarred and uninhabitable. But at the center of it all was the planet from which the distress signal had originated. Its surface was dark and quiet, and there was an unnatural chill in the air. Something was wrong. "Scan the planet," Alix ordered. The sensors on the Ragnarok flickered to life, sending out waves of energy to probe the planet below. After a few moments, the results came back. The atmosphere was hostile, full of toxic gases and extreme radiation. There was no sign of life on the surface. The only thing that stood out was a massive, strange structure buried deep beneath the planet's surface. Whatever had sent the distress signal was clearly not human. But the question remained, what kind of threat were they facing? "We've detected unusual energy readings from the surface," the chief scientist, Dr. Miles, reported. "It's unlike anything we've encountered before. It's possible the invaders are using this planet as a staging ground." Alix's mind raced. She had been in situations like this before, but this was different. This wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a race against time. If the enemy had a base here, it meant they were planning something huge. "We need to land," Alix said, her voice firm. "Prepare the landing party. Everyone else, stay on alert. We're going in." As the fleet made its way toward the planet, Alix couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. But there was no turning back. The Deathworlders were known for their courage, and this would be no different. Whatever the enemy was planning, they would stop it. After all, that was the Deathworlder way. And so, the fleet descended into the unknown, ready to face whatever waited on the surface of that mysterious planet. Preparing for war. The days leading up to the planet's surface were filled with tension and preparation. On the flagship Ragnarok, Captain Alex Stroud spent countless hours poring over strategy reports, analyzing the data from the reconnaissance team, and meeting with her officers. The atmosphere in the fleet was electric with anticipation. Each crew member knew that they were about to face a battle that would test not only their skills but their very survival. Every decision they made, every move they executed, would determine the fate of the galaxy. As the fleet moved closer to the planet, the enormous weight of the unknown pressed heavily on everyone. This wasn't just any battle. This wasn't just another alien race to defeat. The distress signal was their first clue, a desperate plea for help from somewhere in the galaxy's most isolated corner. But the real question was, what had caused the distress? What threat could make an entire civilization call for aid when no one was supposed to be out there? In the war rooms aboard the Ragnarok, Helix addressed her commanders. The briefing room was filled with the best and brightest the Deathworlders had to offer. Tacticians, battle veterans, and specialists in every field. Each of them had their own stories, their own victories and losses, but now they were all united in one goal: to survive and to protect the galaxy. "We don't know what we're walking into," Alex said, standing in front of a holographic display of the planet. "But we've got one advantage: us. We're Deathworlders. Our entire existence is based on surviving impossible situations. This is just another one of those." A few of the soldiers nodded, some with the stoic expressions of veterans who had seen it all, others with the intense focus of those who had something to prove. The Deathworlders were not known for their arrogance, but for their unwavering belief in their ability to overcome any obstacle, no matter the odds. Our first priority is to secure the distress signal's origin point, Alex continued. It's likely that whoever, or whatever, is behind this is still on the planet. Our secondary objective is to understand the enemy's technology. We can't risk going in blind. And finally, we need to find out who sent the signal and why. Are they friend or foe? If they're allies, we'll help them. If they're enemies, we won't hesitate to do what's necessary. The room fell silent. The plan was clear, but the risks were high. As the crew dispersed to finalize preparations, Alex stood alone for a moment, staring out the viewports of the Ragnarok. The planet below was a cold, silent world. It was uninhabitable, covered in toxic gas and constant storms, but something on its surface, something hidden deep beneath, had drawn the Deathworlders in. And they had no idea what they would find when they arrived. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. The Deathworlder fleet descended into the planet's atmosphere, the ships cutting through the thick clouds of toxic gases that shrouded the surface. The turbulence was fierce, the ships buffeted by violent storms, but the crew members didn't flinch. They had trained for worse. Each ship in the fleet carried its own specialized team, each with a specific role in the coming conflict. Some were tactical units, trained in ground combat, while others were engineers, ready to adapt and modify equipment on the fly. The soldiers were all veterans of previous conflicts, tough and battle-hardened, but the uncertainty of what lay ahead kept even the most seasoned warriors on edge. As the Ragnarok touched down on the surface, Alex took one last look at her ship's surroundings. The landscape was bleak, filled with jagged mountains and craggy, dead terrain. There was no sign of life. But beneath the surface, the mission data had pinpointed something unusual, a structure buried deep within the planet's crust. The only question was, who had built it and why? With a final glance at her crew, Alex gave the order. Suit up. We move out in 5. In moments, the soldiers were in their tactical gear, each equipped with state-of-the-art weapons, breathing filters, and survival packs. The air was thick with poison, but the suits provided just enough protection to allow them to function for a limited time. The only thing that could stop them now was a threat too great for even their unmatched skills to handle. But they had come this far. There was no turning back. The first step was to secure the landing zone. The planet's surface, though hostile, was largely undisturbed. The atmosphere's extreme conditions had kept most life forms at bay. But as Alex and her team moved toward the coordinates of the distress signal, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every shadow seemed darker, every gust of wind more menacing. Keep your eyes open, Alex warned, her voice low and steady. We don't know what we're dealing with yet. The team advanced cautiously, their boots crunching against the dry, cracked earth beneath them. The ground trembled occasionally, a reminder that this planet was not stable. It was as if the very planet was alive with danger. After hours of navigating treacherous terrain, they reached the entrance to a massive underground structure. It was ancient, its walls covered in alien symbols, some of which flickered with strange energy. The team quickly set up a perimeter and began to investigate. The structure appeared abandoned, yet the energy readings were off the charts. Something had been active here recently. Is this where the distress signal came from? One of the engineers asked, inspecting a nearby console that had been left open and inactive for years. Yes, Alex confirmed. This is it. The doors of the structure slowly opened with a heavy mechanical groan, revealing a dark, cold corridor that stretched deep into the planet's core. Every step felt like they were descending into the heart of something ancient and powerful. The team's weapons were at the ready, their senses heightened, knowing that any corner could hide a danger they were not prepared for. Alex's mind raced. They had come to find out who had sent the signal. They had come to stop whatever enemy had set their sights on the galaxy. But as they ventured deeper, she couldn't shake the sense that they were not just walking into a battle. They were walking into a war that had been centuries in the making. Whatever the truth was, they had to face it now. And with that thought, the door to the unknown slammed shut behind them. The fight for the galaxy's survival had truly begun. The enemy revealed. The air inside the massive structure was heavy and stale, the faint hum of unseen machinery echoing through the corridors like whispers from a forgotten age. The Deathworlder team moved cautiously through the darkened halls, their footsteps muffled by the thick layers of dust that had built up over centuries of abandonment. The walls were adorned with strange, glowing symbols, pulsing rhythmically in the dark, casting eerie shadows across the team's faces. Each symbol seemed to hold a secret, one that could change the course of the entire galaxy. Captain Alex Stroud led the way, her sharp eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. The unsettling silence of the place was enough to put anyone on edge, but the Deathworlders had seen far worse. Their training had prepared them for environments like this, where danger lurked in every shadow, where the very air could turn against them. Yet there was something different about this place, something far more sinister. After several minutes of navigating the labyrinthine structure, the team reached what appeared to be a central chamber. The walls here were lined with strange, metallic panels, and the floor was covered in a fine layer of dust, disturbed only by their approach. In the center of the room stood a large alien console, its surface covered in intricate patterns and designs. Alex stepped forward, her gloved hand brushing over the cool surface. The moment her fingers made contact, the console flickered to life, lighting up with an array of symbols and energy pulses. The team watched in stunned silence as the screen began to display a series of images. Images of the galaxy, of countless worlds in various stages of destruction. There were flashes of spaceships, battles, and exploding planets. The images seemed to be projections, as though they were being viewed from an otherworldly perspective. Alex's breath caught in her throat as she realized the gravity of what was happening. "What are we looking at?" Lieutenant Vargas asked, his voice a low whisper. Alex frowned, her mind racing. This isn't just some ancient civilization's records. This looks like a map of destruction. The screen flickered again, and suddenly, a new image appeared, one that made the blood in Alex's veins run cold. A massive fleet of alien ships appeared, unlike anything the Deathworlders had ever encountered. They were sleek, dark, and ominous, their designs completely alien to any known species in the galaxy. The ships were enormous, their shapes geometric and jagged, as though they had been designed to inspire fear in anyone who saw them. And then, at the forefront of the fleet, was a ship so massive, so powerful, that it seemed to warp the space around it. Its dark hull was covered in strange symbols, and it pulsed with an eerie red light. The ship seemed to breathe with an unnatural life of its own. Alex's mind raced as she realized what she was seeing. These ships, they're not just invaders, they're conquerors. The console shifted again, and this time, the view zoomed in on one of the alien ships. On its surface, a series of symbols were etched, but they were unlike anything Alex had ever seen before. They were ancient, cryptic, and chilling. The language was unfamiliar, but there was no mistaking the message it sent. These beings had conquered worlds, entire star systems, and they were coming for the galaxy. "Captain, we're dealing with something far beyond what we expected," Dr. Miles, the fleet's chief scientist, said, his voice tinged with both awe and fear. "This isn't just an invasion. This is a predatory species, something ancient, something hungry." Alex nodded, her grip tightening on her weapon. "We've seen their fleet, but who are they?" At that moment, a new image flashed across the console, one that struck Alex like a lightning bolt. The face of a creature appeared, tall, imposing, and humanoid, but with skin like obsidian stone, dark and smooth, reflecting the light around it. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural red light, and a cruel smile played across its face. The being seemed to radiate an aura of authority and power, as though it commanded not just the fleet, but the very space around it. "This," Alex murmured, her voice trailing off as the realization set in. "This is the leader. This is the being in charge of the fleet." The alien leader's image disappeared, replaced by a series of cryptic messages. But before anyone could react, the console emitted a deep, vibrating hum, and the room shook violently. The entire structure seemed to tremble, as if something was waking up beneath them. The walls of the chamber groaned, and the floor cracked as an unnatural energy filled the air. "Something's happening," Lieutenant Vargas shouted. Alex turned to her team, her face set in determination. "Get ready. They know we're here now. We're about to find out just how far their reach extends." The room shook once more, and then suddenly, the ceiling above them split open with a deafening roar. The team barely had time to react before a massive ship descended from the darkness above, its hull sleek and black, its design unmistakably alien. It hovered for a moment before docking with the structure. The massive doors of the ship opened, revealing a group of heavily armored alien soldiers, each one towering over the humans. These aliens were different from anything the Deathworlders had encountered before. Their bodies were sleek and muscular, their armor almost organic in nature, pulsating with energy. Their eyes glowed an ominous red, and their movements were swift and precise, as if they had been trained for centuries to fight and conquer. Alex quickly raised her weapon, signaling her team to do the same. "This is it. They've come for us." The alien soldiers moved forward, their weapons raised. But before they could attack, Alex made a quick decision. "Fall back. To the extraction point. We can't fight them here." The team quickly retreated, moving as one, their training kicking in as they navigated the dangerous terrain of the ancient structure. Behind them, the alien soldiers pursued, their footfalls heavy and relentless. The Deathworlders were fast, but these aliens seemed to move with a precision and speed that matched their own. Alex's mind raced as they sprinted through the dark halls. Who were these creatures? How had they managed to remain hidden for so long? The question swirled in her mind as the team fought their way through the structure, the sounds of the alien soldiers' pursuit growing louder with each passing moment. The truth was clear now. The galaxy was facing an enemy like no other, one that had been biding its time, preparing to strike when the galaxy was at its weakest. And now, the Deathworlders were the only hope left to stop them. The battle begins. The Ragnarok sensors screamed in alarm as the Deathworlder fleet descended toward the surface, their dark, jagged ships cutting through the toxic atmosphere. The planet's violent storms continued to rage, but the fleet had trained for far worse. The massive ships rumbled through the clouds like thunder, their engines pushing against the heavy winds with relentless force. Inside the flagship, Captain Alex Stroud stood at the command center, her eyes fixed on the holographic projection of the battlefield ahead. "What are our chances?" Alex asked, her voice calm despite the chaos surrounding them. "We're outnumbered, Captain," Lieutenant Vargas replied, his tone grim. "The alien fleet has mobilized faster than we expected. They've already begun positioning their ships in orbit, and we're likely walking into a trap. But we have one advantage. We're not afraid to fight dirty." Alex's lips curved into a cold smile. She had led her people through worse odds, and this time would be no different. "That's all we need. Prepare the fleet for full engagement." As the fleet closed in on the alien forces, a surge of energy pulsed through the ships. The Deathworlders had always relied on speed, tactics, and sheer willpower to outmaneuver their enemies, but this time they would need more. The alien invaders, whose ships seemed to be made of dark, living metal, were unlike any force the galaxy had encountered. Their weapons were devastating, capable of ripping apart entire ships in a single shot, but the Deathworlders had faced worse. "Alex," came the voice of Dr. Miles over the comms, We've identified their flagship. It's massive, and its shields are already up. We're going to have to hit it with everything we've got." Alix nodded, gripping the armrest of her seat. The flagship was an imposing sight, a black behemoth floating in space, its hull slick and gleaming with a strange, unnatural light. It was the heart of the alien armada, and if they didn't neutralize it, the fleet would be unstoppable. "Set course for the flagship. Full speed ahead. Get us close enough to land a direct strike." The fleet surged forward, breaking through the chaos of the battle. The Deathworlder ships cut through the alien forces like knives through soft flesh, their weapons firing with pinpoint accuracy. Missiles exploded on impact, sending alien ships tumbling out of formation. But for every alien ship that fell, another seemed to take its place. The enemy's numbers were overwhelming, and the Deathworlders were being pushed to the brink. Despite the relentless fire they were receiving, the Deathworlders held their ground. Their ships were designed for this kind of battle-tested and armored to withstand the heaviest blows. The crew inside the Ragnarok moved with deadly precision, each crew member executing their tasks without hesitation. Gunners fired relentlessly, targeting the alien ship's weak points, while the pilots executed evasive maneuvers that sent the fleet darting in and out of enemy fire. As the battle raged on, Alix stood in the command center, her face set in a mask of concentration. She could feel the weight of the mission pressing down on her shoulders. Every decision she made, every tactic she used, could mean the difference between life and death. But she didn't flinch. This was the moment she had trained for. "We've got incoming," Vargas shouted from his station. Alien fighters closing in from the right. The Deathworlder fleet had already taken a heavy toll on the alien armada, but the invaders were relentless. The enemy's smaller, more agile fighters zipped through space with frightening speed, their weapons firing in quick succession. The Deathworlders' fleet responded with equal intensity, but it wasn't enough to stop the oncoming wave of alien ships. "Deploy the fighter squads," Alix ordered, her voice steady. "We need to thin their numbers before they breach our defenses." A series of smaller Deathworlder fighters launched from the Ragnarok's bays, their engines roaring as they shot into the fray. The pilots were fearless, skilled, and ready to give their all for the survival of the galaxy. In moments, the sky was filled with a chaotic dance of ships, blazing trails of light flashing across the dark expanse of space as explosions erupted in every direction. The battle was madness. The Deathworlders, despite their fierce resolve, were still vastly outnumbered. Their strategy was to focus on precision strikes, aiming to disable key alien vessels before they could regroup. The alien fleet, however, seemed to anticipate their every move, responding with an unrelenting onslaught of firepower. As the Ragnarok neared the alien flagship, Alix felt a surge of determination. This was their chance, their only chance. They had to land a critical blow before the enemy could finish what they had started. "Lock weapons onto the flagship's core," Alix ordered, her voice unyielding. "Give them everything we've got." The Ragnarok's weapons systems hummed to life, targeting the alien flagship with deadly accuracy. Every cannon, every missile, every laser was focused on that one target. The flagship's shields flared to life, shimmering with energy as they absorbed the incoming fire. But the Deathworlders didn't stop. They couldn't afford to stop. "Captain," Vargas warned, his voice tense, "we're getting too close. If we don't break off soon, we'll be caught in their gravity well." Alix didn't hesitate. "Keep firing. We're not leaving until that ship is crippled." The Ragnarok closed the distance, its guns firing non-stop as it got closer to the alien flagship. The Ragnarok's shields flickered under the constant barrage, but they held firm, absorbing the impact of enemy fire. The alien flagship retaliated with massive plasma bursts, some of which grazed the Ragnarok's hull, sending violent tremors through the ship. But Alix and her crew were undeterred. "Direct hit," one of the crew members shouted from the weapons station. "The flagship's shields are weakening." The fleet watched as the massive flagship shuddered under the barrage, its shields flickering erratically. Alex knew they had one shot left. "Full power to the main cannon," she ordered. "Give them everything we have." The Ragnarok's main cannon, a weapon capable of unleashing a devastating burst of energy, powered up. With a roar, the cannon fired, sending a beam of brilliant energy straight toward the heart of the alien flagship. Time seemed to slow as the beam struck, piercing through the flagship's weakened shields and slamming into its core. The explosion that followed was immense, a shockwave of light and energy that rippled through space. For a moment, everything went quiet. The alien flagship drifted in space, its massive hull crumbling under the impact. The Deathworlder fleet held their breath as the smoke and debris cleared. The flagship was still intact, but its defenses were shattered. It was vulnerable. "We've done it," Vargas shouted. "The flagship is down. It's crippled." But as the dust settled and the fleet took stock of their victory, the battle raged on. The alien forces were far from defeated, and the Deathworlders knew they had only won a small part of the war. But as the flagship's massive hull began to list, the Deathworlders had proven one thing. They were not going to surrender. They would fight until the very end, no matter how impossible the odds. And the true test had just begun. Turning the tide. The battle was far from over. Despite the Deathworlders' successful strike against the alien flagship, the enemy's forces were still overwhelming. Their relentless attacks continued, and the Deathworlder fleet found itself entrenched in a deadly standoff. Alien fighters swarmed in from every direction, their sharp, sleek ships darting around the Deathworlder vessels like predatory insects. The sky was filled with explosions, the space around them crackling with energy as the two sides clashed with ferocious intensity. But the Deathworlders weren't giving up. They were survivors, trained to adapt to any situation. They had faced impossible odds before, and they would do so again. The real question now wasn't whether they could win. It was how they could outsmart an enemy that seemed to have an answer for every move they made. Inside the Ragnarok, Captain Alex Stroud was focused, her mind racing through strategy as her crew worked tirelessly. They had just crippled the flagship, but that wasn't enough. The remaining alien fleet still posed a massive threat, and it was clear that this battle was far from decided. Every second brought new waves of enemy fighters, each one more aggressive than the last. "Captain," Lieutenant Vargas said urgently, "the alien fleet is regrouping. They're shifting tactics. They're setting up a blockade around the remaining ships. We can't break through without taking more damage." Alex's eyes narrowed as she studied the holographic projections of the battlefield. The alien forces had been reorganizing, their ships aligning in a formation that would make it nearly impossible for the Deathworlder fleet to punch through. The sheer coordination of their movements suggested that they were no longer just reacting. They were anticipating their every move. "I need a way to break their formation," Alex said, her mind already working through the possibilities. "Something they won't expect." Her eyes flicked over to Dr. Miles, the chief scientist, who had been monitoring the enemy's technological patterns. Dr. Miles was a brilliant mind, and Alex trusted him more than anyone when it came to solving problems. He looked back at her with a spark of understanding. "We could create a diversion," Dr. Miles suggested. "If we can create a disruption in their communication systems, they'll lose their cohesion. We can use our jammers to break their coordination, cause confusion. It might give us the window we need to strike." Alex's lips curled into a knowing smile. It was risky, but it was their best shot. Do it. Within moments, Dr. Miles and his team initiated the plan. The Ragnarok's jamming systems powered up, sending out a powerful pulse that disrupted the alien fleet's communication networks. At first, the aliens didn't seem to notice, but then, one by one, their formations began to break apart. The previously well-coordinated armada became disjointed, their ships drifting away from their intended paths. For the first time in the battle, the Deathworlders had the advantage. "Now's our chance," Alex shouted. "Push forward, full force. Take out their command ships first." The Deathworlder fleet responded immediately, charging through the gap that the jamming had created. Their ships surged forward, cutting through the disorganized alien lines with brutal efficiency. The alien fighters, confused and out of sync, were easy targets for the faster and more agile Deathworlder ships. Missiles and laser blasts rained down upon the enemy, tearing through the hulls of alien ships with deadly precision. The Ragnarok itself fired a series of devastating blasts, each one landing with pinpoint accuracy on key alien vessels. One after another, enemy ships exploded into fireballs, their once intact hulls shattered by the Deathworlder onslaught. But even as they tore through the alien fleet, Alex knew that this was only the beginning. The alien forces were not going to give up without a final fight. "Keep up the pressure," Alex ordered. "Target their engines. We cripple them. We win." As the Deathworlder ships tore through the enemy ranks, it became clear that the tide was turning. The alien fleet, once a nearly unstoppable force, was beginning to fracture under the sustained attack. But even as their lines faltered, the enemy's larger, more powerful ships continued to resist. The Ragnarok took hit after hit as it pushed forward, its shields flickering but holding strong. Alex's mind was a blur of calculations, her eyes constantly scanning the battlefield, looking for any sign of weakness in the enemy's defense. The Deathworlders had always relied on unconventional tactics, and they were proving it once again. By isolating key enemy ships, they had broken the enemy's cohesion, scattering them like ants. But it wasn't enough to just break their lines. They needed to crush the heart of the enemy fleet, the command ship that still loomed ominously at the center of the battle. Alex watched as the remaining alien forces tried to regroup, their ships attempting to form a defensive perimeter around their flagship. It was their last-ditch effort to protect the core of their fleet. But Alex saw an opening, a vulnerable point in their defenses. She knew what needed to be done. "Prepare for a direct assault," she ordered. "Target their flagship with everything we have. We end this now." The Ragnarok charged toward the alien flagship, its cannons blazing as it cut through the remaining ships like a battering ram. The Deathworlder fleet followed suit, their firepower focused entirely on the flagship. The remaining alien ships fought valiantly to defend their leader, but they were overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of the Deathworlders' assault. The flagship's shields flickered, struggling to hold against the barrage. The Ragnarok's cannons fired one last time, a final devastating shot that tore through the alien flagship's defenses. The explosion was massive, sending a shockwave through space. For a moment, it seemed like the entire galaxy held its breath. And then the flagship crumpled. The massive dark ship that had once seemed invincible was now just a floating wreck. The Deathworlders had won their battle, but the cost had been high. The flagship had been destroyed, and with it, the heart of the alien invasion. But the alien forces, though disorganized and in disarray, were not yet finished. "Hold the line," Alex said, her voice low but fierce. "We've won the first battle, but we still have a long way to go." As the Deathworlder fleet regrouped, Alex could feel the weight of what they had accomplished. They had turned the tide, yes, but the war was far from over. The alien forces would not retreat easily, but the Deathworlders had proven their worth. They had shown the galaxy that they would not go down without a fight. The battle had shifted in their favor. The question now was whether they could keep it that way. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. Victory or sacrifice. The battle, though fierce and overwhelming, was drawing to a close, but the war was far from over. The Deathworlder fleet had achieved a significant victory by crippling the alien flagship, causing their forces to fracture, but the cost of that victory weighed heavily on Captain Alex Stroud. The price of each success had been steep. The fleet had lost several ships, and many brave soldiers had given their lives to secure this moment. The stars were brighter now, yet the silence in the command center of the Ragnarok was deafening. "We've done it," Vargas said quietly, his voice a mix of relief and disbelief. "The flagship's down. The alien fleet is in disarray, but It doesn't feel like victory. Not yet. Alex nodded grimly, her gaze fixed on the holographic map of the battlefield. The scattered remnants of the alien fleet were regrouping, their forces still formidable, but their coordination was shattered. This was the Deathworlders' moment to strike, to end the invasion before it could be rebuilt. The question was no longer whether they could win, but whether they could survive the final push. "We've lost too many," Alex said, her voice heavy with the burden of leadership. "Our forces are stretched thin. We're not going to make it through this unless we give everything." The Ragnarok's communications officer spoke up, his tone urgent. "Captain, the last of their reinforcements are on their way. If we don't strike now, we'll be overrun. We need to act fast." Alex's eyes flicked to the tactical display in front of her. The enemy's final wave of reinforcements, though not as strong as their initial fleet, was closing in. They had one chance left, one final attack to break the remaining alien forces before they could regroup and rebuild their strength. But there was no doubt in her mind. To finish this, they would need to sacrifice. Alex turned to her officers, her face set with determination. "We do this now. We push through, no matter the cost. We finish this fight." The Deathworlders were no strangers to sacrifice. They had survived the most dangerous of circumstances, and in battle, they had always been willing to give everything for the greater good. But as Alex looked around the room at her weary crew, her heart weighed heavily. They had already given so much. "We'll split our forces," Alex continued. "A small group will take the direct route and target the alien command ships. The rest of us will hold the line, prevent any reinforcements from reaching the flagship. We may lose more ships, but we don't have a choice. We end this today." Her officers nodded in agreement. There was no hesitation. The Deathworlders knew what they had to do, even if it meant paying the ultimate price. The Ragnarok and the rest of the fleet moved into position, their engines roaring as they engaged in one final desperate push toward the heart of the alien armada. The Deathworlders' strategy was simple: divide and conquer. A portion of their fleet would charge straight toward the enemy's remaining command ships, hoping to destroy the leadership structure and disrupt the remaining forces. The rest would hold back, using their superior maneuverability to create distractions and engage the enemy in skirmishes that would wear them down. As the fleet surged forward, Alex's mind raced. This was the decisive moment. They had to land the killing blow or risk being overrun by the alien invaders. There was no room for second chances. "Prepare for the final assault," Alex ordered, her voice cutting through the tension in the command room. "We hit them hard, hit them fast, and we don't stop until they're gone." The final assault began in a thunderous explosion of energy. Deathworlder ships rained missiles and laser fire upon the remaining alien command ships, each shot carefully calculated to breach the alien shields and destroy key systems. The alien fleet, disoriented and disjointed from their earlier loss of coordination, struggled to respond effectively. But even as the Deathworlders broke through their defenses, the enemy's desperation showed. They launched their last reserves: fighters, smaller ships, anything they could use to stop the oncoming destruction. Alex's heart pounded as the Ragnarok weaved through a sea of explosions, evading enemy fire with agile precision. The crew was working together, each member fully aware that their survival depended on their ability to outthink and outfight the alien forces. But despite their success, there was no time to relax. The final enemy command ship remained intact, and it was moving into position for one last stand. "We've almost got them," Vargas said, his voice tense. "But that ship's about to fire. If we don't stop it, it'll take out half our fleet." Alex's hand tightened around the armrest of her seat. The alien command ship was charging its main cannon, a weapon capable of obliterating entire fleets in one strike. This was it. They had to stop it, or everything they had fought for would be lost. "Full speed ahead," Alex commanded, her voice resolute. "We have to take that ship out before it can fire." The Ragnarok surged forward, its engines screaming as it pushed through the final moments of the battle. The alien ship fired, its energy beams shooting through space, tearing apart anything in its path. But at the last moment, the Ragnarok fired everything it had, launching a final devastating barrage at the alien ship. The blast hit the command ship dead center, tearing through its shields and hull. The enemy vessel exploded in a brilliant burst of light, its remains drifting into space as a lifeless carcass. The battlefield fell silent for a moment. The Deathworlder fleet had done it. The alien invaders had been defeated, their forces shattered. But as the smoke cleared, Alex couldn't shake the feeling of loss. The price of victory had been steep, and the cost would stay with them forever. Hours later, as the fleet regrouped in the aftermath of the battle, Alex stood on the bridge of the Ragnarok, looking out at the wreckage of the battlefield. The alien forces had been defeated, their ships either destroyed or scattered across the expanse of space. But the victory felt hollow. "We did it," Vargas said quietly, standing beside her. "We saved the galaxy. The fleet's intact, and the invaders are gone." Alex nodded but said nothing. She had led them to victory, yes, but at what cost? Many of her crew had perished in the battle. Friends, soldiers, comrades. Their sacrifices had been necessary, but they were still felt deeply. The war was over, but the scars of battle remained. "The galaxy is safe," Alex said, her voice low. "But we can never forget the price it took to get here. We gave everything. And we owe it to those who gave their lives to ensure that this victory means something." As the fleet turned to head home, Alex gazed out at the stars, the endless void stretching before her. The universe was vast, and humanity was small in comparison. But the Deathworlders had shown that even in the face of unimaginable odds, the human spirit could not be broken. They had fought for survival, for freedom, for their very existence, and in doing so, they had proven that no matter how dark the galaxy became, humanity would always rise, always fight, and always endure. For they were Deathworlders, and they would never be defeated. The galaxy had been saved, but at a cost. Yet, as long as there were survivors, the fight would continue. The story of the Deathworlders was far from over.